What's up, guys and gals of the movement world? It's Sean Mishka, the Movement Miyagi, coming to you with our fourth installment in preparation for the 2022 National Football League draft coming up this week. And in this fourth and final installment, we're going to take a little peek into arguably the most polarizing player in all of the 2022 National Football League draft in quarterback out of Liberty University, Malik Willis. Now, Malik Willis spent 2 years at Auburn before transferring to Liberty. And in this time, especially in these last 2 years, of course, while taking sort of this next tier of football by storm, he actually took the entire college football world by storm. And there was really been quite some buzz about him. Obviously, unless you've been living under a rock, you already are well aware of this. In fact, 2 years ago, or in that junior year at Liberty, his first year at Liberty, I was actually turned on to him by someone that I highly respect in the football world. And I actually started watching some Liberty football. In fact, you guys have heard me probably say before that I don't watch a lot of college football because I'm so engaged in the National Football League season at that time of the year that it's very rare for me to get to sit down and watch some college football. But when I do, I actually draw my attention to somebody whose skill set really appeals to me. And Malik Willis happened to be one of those guys. So anytime that I had an opportunity, I was even flipping on the ESPN app to be able to try and see when Liberty games were coming on, because this is a very intriguing prospect, mostly because of his upside. Now, that intrigue has some boom or bust type of potential. And obviously, that's the reason why you get some people that are kind of on the fence about who he is, what his skill set is about, and what he brings to the NFL table. Obviously, if I've been spending the last 2 years taking some time out of my schedule to or taking some time specifically out of my NFL busy schedule to kind of dive into what he's doing, you can see which side of the fence I exist on. And I'm a fan of what he is, who he is, and what he has the potential of doing in the National Football League. Now, there are a few things that I want to say about his skill set before we dive into a number of plays. And I think we're going to look at 3 or 4 plays today. The deep dive is going to be a little bit more surface level than we typically would take it. And that's for a number of reasons, mostly because of that intrigue, because of that polarizing nature of Malik Willis's skill set, and because of his high profile nature in this 2022 National Football League draft, most people have already seen many of the plays that we could potentially dive into. The other thing is that I want to bring a new lens, a different lens at looking at what he does and how he does it, just like we would on any given movement play of the week or any other analysis. If unless you've been living under a rock, you also probably have heard some of those naysayers, some of those draft pundits who are maybe on the other side of the fence than what I currently stand on with Malik Willis's skill set. That there are some people who believe that either he was playing at too low a competition level, he folded under pressure, he is just a runner. He should try to become a running back. He should try to become a wide receiver, so on and so forth. You guys have heard and seen the list, most likely, of some of those critiques, some of those criticisms. Some of them could be argued, some of them could be warranted. And some of them are just flat out like lazy takes. Like I've seen some over this course of this week talking about how he's, nothing but a glorified running back. He should consider the position switch. Let's rewind just 3 or 4 years ago when Lamar Jackson was coming into the National Football League, and you had those same old head, old hat type people making similar comments about Lamar Jackson. And then what? Lo and behold, 2 years into his NFL career, he wins the Most Valuable Player award. And I'm not saying that Malik Willis is going to go ahead and win a Most Valuable Player award and follow in Lamar Jackson's footsteps, but I think the takes are very, very lazy. The takes are very, very outdated. And I think the thing that we need to look at about Malik Willis or any quarterback like him is this is a true dual threat type of guy. And granted, he wasn't always playing against the highest of competition levels at Liberty. However, when he did have those opportunities, or even when he was playing at Liberty, even when he was head and shoulders above the rest of the competition that he was playing against. He was solving some awfully complex movement problems and showing some nuances within his skill that really can't be faked no matter who it is that you're playing against. Now, there are a few things that I want to say here. Again, I said that he's the true definition of a dual threat. People have been making this comparison, much like what I sort of alluded to, but I'm not making the comparison between Malik Willis and Lamar Jackson. Their skill sets are completely and entirely different. They're both very authentic with what they do and how they do it. Just even look at their body types. Just because Malik Willis has some elusive nature into what he does and how he goes about solving problems doesn't mean that his movement skill, particularly in solving some of those movement problems with the ball in his hands, matches up to a Lamar Jackson who is the rarest of rare breeds at the position in being elusive, in evading opponents. I think that would be really unfair to expect Malik Willis to kind of uphold to that standard of what Lamar Jackson has set. In my mind, Malik Willis is probably closer to say like a Jalen Hurts or somebody of that nature. And remember, I just had Jalen Hurts on the all movement team. He was third team all movement team in 2021. So I actually view a Malik Willis maybe just a step or notch above in what he does from a dual threat nature. And when I say a step above or a step above, say a Jalen Hurts, it's just because of the way that he solves problems in this dual threat type of fashion. Now, I will say at 6 foot ish and 219 to 225 pounds, depending on when he was being measured and when he was being weighed, I do think he's maybe a little thick. And I think that could benefit him in some ways. It will offer a strength because he does have some strength and power capabilities and some strength and power strategies to what he does when defenders are wrapping him up. And if he is going to be running the ball a lot, depending on how much and how often he's able to give himself up and how often he slides and how much contact he absorbs, that could be in his favor or benefit. But I actually would like to see what would happen if he was maybe in that 210 to 212-ish type of range at his height. I think the speed at the National Football League level, even though he is plenty fast playing against college players, and he does have some movement fluidity, he does have some shimmy and shake, as we're about to see today. And if you look at any of his highlights, you'll see from him. I think you don't want to sacrifice that at the National Football League level. So I would like to maybe see what would happen if he were to be just a little lighter. But that's neither here nor there. Like I said, definition of a dual threat quarterback, has an absolute rocket launcher for an arm. His escapability, which we've already talked about, is plus plus. It is something that obviously is going to be a calling card, particularly for him in his movement skill at the National Football League level, with where the NFL is going, with the elusive, evasive, dynamic, athletic movers at the quarterback position. And because of this unique rocket launcher like arm strength, he's almost always on the ready to throw. And obviously that is an intentional thing, but also he doesn't need a big windup. As long as he's perceiving and he is able to time throws, and now sometimes his accuracy suffers a little bit. Sometimes his location, particularly when he's running the football and scrambling and looking to throw, he needs a little bit better anticipation and things of that nature in order to be NFL ready. But the thing with his elusive nature, when he does make the decision to not only escape the pocket, but potentially become a runner, when he decides to go, he is awfully attuned and awfully adaptable. And I think we're going to see that in our plays today. But if you haven't looked at his highlights, I think you're going to see that on his highlights as well. And I think we're going to see it even more at the NFL level. I would like to see a team draft him and immediately play him. Sort of as in the Lamar Jackson. And I'm not trying to make the comparison between the skill sets, but the situation itself, because I think with this type of adaptable, creative nature at the quarterback position, he's going to find himself into certain creative movement solutions. He's going to kind of learn on the job. And I think that learning on the job will actually be better for him And of course, a lot goes into being a National Football League quarterback. And that is much of that is far, far beyond my reach because it's definitely not my specialty by any means. So, when something I do know a little bit something about is evasive movement and agile movement in space or in tight spaces as well, for that matter, when a ball carrying player is obviously trying to evade and solve problems in this way. So, our focus today over these 3 or 4 plays that we're going to look into are really going to be centered there. It's not going to be centered around what reads he made and what he's recognizing and tactical strategies and his throwing action and his timing and his tempo and his anticipation as a passer. But instead, what I want to do is really illuminate for you as to what makes Malik Willis's movement skill set when he is moving as a mover first and foremost. Now, we're all always moving, right? Like sport is a problem solving activity where movements are used to produce the necessary solutions. Shout out to Stephen Verkoshansky. But I think what we need to remember here is the thing that makes Malik Willis do what he does as part of his form of life is really where we want to shine that light today. Okay. And that probably doesn't come as any shock or surprise for those who've followed me and my work and my perspective at Football Beyond the Stats. I mentioned earlier in regards to some of the criticisms that are out there, and I've already kind of debunked some of those things already. But the one thing I do think there is some credence potentially to is this idea that he seemed to fall off a bit when more eyes got on him. As the season went along, he seemed to have some mixed issues, both throwing the football as well as then kind of pressing to make too many plays, to make a lot out of nothing. And now he has, because of his adaptability and his creativity and just the nature of his movement style, when he's at his best, he's playing kind of backyard football in a Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts type of style. Okay. However, when more eyes got on him as the season progressed, pressure went up. And I started to see maybe that those degrees of freedom across the system, perceptions, intentions, and actions. So, how he's making decisions and how he's solving problems in the world might have become a little fixed and a little frozen. So, his system got closed off to some of its opportunities or options when he was playing with greater freedom. So, that is something to be somewhat concerned about because at the National Football League level, you always have a lot of eyes on you, all 1,696 players, and particularly those who are first round draft picks, as well as particularly those who happen to be starting National Football League quarterbacks. So you're always under those constraints and those key performance inhibitors of pressure and anxiety. And the system will have to be able to become resilient to those perturbations. So a few plays. I think I'm going to look at 4. Notice this is the Senior Bowl. Some of the criticism that we mentioned earlier was he was playing against guys who were at lower levels. That's not the case here. He's playing against the best seniors in the country, most of the best seniors in the country. And now this is an exhibition game for all intents and purposes, right? However, this type of exhibition is supposed to showcase one's movement skill set. And I think it definitely did that with Malik Willis. If you followed any of the Senior Bowl coverage, what you may recall or remember is that Malik Willis was absolutely the star of the entire week. In practices, there was a day of practice, I believe it was like in the middle of the week, where it was raining cats and dogs. It was pouring rain. And in those constraints, and in those conditions, remember, dexterity is about the ability to solve any movement problem in any situation and across conditions. And when conditions change, it really tells us what that movement skill is about. And Malik Willis was the only guy who was really shining on that respective day. Now, of course, that's relatively loosely put, but for all intents and purposes, he did everything he needed to check the boxes in this Senior Bowl test. And we're going to see why. So let's go ahead and fast forward here to one of the plays. We'll go through at our normal speed, and then we'll go at 50% speed. We won't go as deep into the landscape of affordances and the true problem solving. So I'm not going to attempt to to tell the movement problem solving story nearly to the same depth as we typically do because we're on the eve of the National Football League draft. So let's go ahead and watch and see what he's up to here on this respective first play. I'm already at 50% speed, so I apologize for that. Let me get us at 100 so we can watch it at normal speed here. Bear with me if you would. Let's see where we at, 51. So we're just going to riff a bit and see what Malik Willis is up to on this play. Okay, and hopefully you guys are able to see some of the same things that pop out to me after we've spent so much time together here at Football Beyond the Stats, getting into the true movement skill and some of these layers of it. And now, some of these plays, I want you to look for the nuances. Hopefully look for them without me having to point them out as much as I typically would, or as much as time as I usually spend. Let's go ahead and watch it at 50% speed here now and see what we get. And we'll hit pause as we typically would, just to see what exactly he's up to. I think the biggest thing that I find is just the calm nature as he takes off and runs. This calmness, this ownership in his navigation. It's an ownership in the speeds, but it's an ownership in the behaviors. And when I say in the behaviors, I don't just mean from his movement actions. I mean his perceptions, what he's looking at, when he's looking at it. It's all calm, it's all open. His intentions, his decision making. Again, it's an open, responsive nature when he starts moving. In his actions, he's not overly in a rush to get where he's going. We're seeing him immediately when he breaks out of the pocket and starts to get in this mode. Watching the fact that he's always in a throwing mode, maybe a little different than, say, we would see from a young Lamar Jackson, where young Lamar Jackson is tucking it right away with the intention of running it. What you'll see from Malik Willis is he is, on all of these plays, a thrower first and foremost. Let's watch it one more time through. And I think what you're going to find there is that because of that ownership, he's always perceiving and acting. Remember, we perceive to act, act to perceive. And you're going to see this constant cyclical relationship. Look at the head, look at the head, look at the eyes, look at the constant scanning. And I lied. Let's watch it one more time. And you'll look for, if you would, the ownership in this scanning process, continuous scanning. Once his intentions change from being a passer to being a mover in space to being a runner, look at the scanning, left, right, and the movement just follows accordingly. And obviously, at the National Football League level, whether you're bigger and thicker or whether you're longer and leaner and slighter, the need to slide and live to play another play, especially if you're a starting NFL running back, needs to be there. Okay. But what we see from him, first and foremost, characteristics: ownership, constant continuous scanning, perception action coupling, a calmness about his movement as he breaks the pocket. And when you got guys chasing you, that's not always the easiest thing to do. Moving on to the second play. I told you we would be going faster than we typically would. Okay. Now we look at another play. And remember, each one of these plays is mostly oriented around him being a runner. But what we find here is, even though he's not about to run on this respective play, and he ends up throwing the ball away. Okay. You might think to yourself, Sean, why are you showing us a play where he throws it away? Well, there's a few things here. We see some need to climb the pocket at times, as opposed to sometimes. There are some times, again, this would be a weakness. Remember, every system has its weakness. There are some times where he is quick to roll, mostly to his right, but he's usually quick to roll and escape the pocket, even though he is still looking to throw. And as we see him here, he's a thrower first, but he's quick to roll as opposed to climbing the pocket, even though he has very nifty, very neat footwork in the pocket. And really, when I say footwork, I just mean perception, action coupling, movement behaviors that are corresponding to that what's unfolding in the problem in front of him. And then when we're talking about the pocket, around him. Okay. And we're going to see that, I believe, in the third play. Not, I believe it is in the third play. But so we're going to see a little difference from him. But in this case, watch him now. Well, let's go back to our slow speed, our 50% speed, knowing that you guys know that I love watching at 50% speed. Thrower first, but we see speed changes, very fluid speed changes. Again, ownership in these speed changes. But look at this relationship right here that he has when this free rusher, and this is something that you see from him a lot. He's awfully connected to immediate local movement problems while still looking deeper beyond. So when that threat becomes to a point where, or a place where it's overly threatening, where it takes away affordances for him, he immediately goes to solving it and then immediately, successively goes on to the next problem. So what we find is he is constantly matched. His speeds, his behaviors are constantly matched to that which what's unfolding in the problem and the information he's picking up. Let's watch it one more time. Okay. Again, it's just a throwaway ball. I get it. But what we find is success, or even just on this play, which what looks to be failure, I should say behaviors, problem solving, will always leave clues about who a player is and what that player's skill execution and problem solving is really about. And that's what we see right here from Malik Willis. A couple more plays to go through. Okay. A couple more plays to go through. So hopefully I'm not completely boring you to death, and hopefully we're able to pick things up here together. Let's see where we're at here. I was on point already. This next play, back into 100% speed, we're going to see some of those relations again. Now he moves and escapes in a different fashion. Okay. And obviously, part of the nature of being a problem solver at the highest of levels is being able to solve constantly changing problems. Remember, no two problems are ever the same. Therefore, no two movement solutions are the same. And you should have an abundance of strategies if you ever hope to be fully adaptable, fully dexterous. And that's what we see here now. The movement problem itself has changed. The free rusher and the position of him has changed, and he changes his behaviors accordingly to match that which what unfolds in the problem. And then we see the flick of the wrist. And now I know that some people are going to be like, okay, here's another throwaway ball. Like, Sean, what are you showing us? It's the pocket movement, guys and gals, that give us clues. One thing he didn't have at Liberty, and a thing that he doesn't have on these respective plays. Now, granted, again, we can't see the all 22. We're only seeing the camera angle from the sideline, which is missing some information for us as viewers. However, what he didn't have at Liberty is something he hasn't really ever gotten exposed to, which is constant separation, open guys on time in many cases, depending on, again, the competition level that he's playing against. But at Liberty, he was making some throws on a rope and throwing some guys open at times, because there was only, I think, really one guy that was capable of gaining separation and getting open consistently. So there were some things that he could potentially do at the NFL level that he actually wasn't able to do based on the people that he was playing with. And that's not a knock on the guys at Liberty. It's just, it is what it is there. Okay. Let's see here. I'm still at 100%. So let's go now to our 50% speed and watch this one over again if we could. Let me get back here. So we see this subtlety of his movement. Okay. Remember, when the threat becomes high enough for him to have to respond, then we see him become very sensitive, very attuned. But look at his movement is very, very subtle to that free rusher. Seen it from him on highlights over and over and over again. This, what appears to be subtle movement to this threat, watch this in relation to that rusher. Okay. And look it right back into throwing mode. I want you guys to recognize the true skillful nature of this, the true adaptive, functional relationship that he's finding himself in here. Don't miss this. Look at the subtle move, and he has options to be able to do that. Talking about usually when guys have that level of creativity, that level of adaptability, it usually is driven by one's form of life and by one's abundance within their toolbox. And that is definitely the case with Malik Willis. Look at right back into throwing mode. Again, we're back into those speed changes. We're back into that movement strategies changes. And then a simple flick of the wrist and the ball's flying. Okay. Again, it's a throwaway ball. I get it. And you might think I'm making more of it than what I should be. And the last play, which was considered the play, I would say the play of the entire Senior Bowl, at least from that which what I followed. And this is a play that ends the half, and we'll watch it here at 100% speed for a couple times through. And you may have already seen this play a few times if you follow the National Football League at all. And even though he doesn't end up scoring, I think there's some special things happening. I don't think I'm overly exaggerating that as I claim that for you guys. So again, we see the adaptability, we see the creativity, we see the thrower first mentality even here. Okay. Now, granted, some of that is being driven by the intentions on this respective play. I get that. Okay. Watch it a couple more times through. Remember, it's right before the half. So it pretty much is a throwing mode, even though he's on the 34-yard line. And even though he almost scores. And again, if this were a Lamar Jackson right here, he probably already would have taken off and tried to exploit that space and then make some guys miss down the field. They just solve problems in different ways. Okay. So let me get that into slow motion and then we can highlight the things that we just talked about. Okay. If you look at this, guys and gals, obviously right here, the adaptability, the creativity, it's always this calmness when the problem breaks down or when the problem intensifies and the information, the complexity goes up, the information goes up too. He stays in a very sensitive, very attuned mode and a very free mode in most cases as well, which I believe that for a young quarterback in today's National Football League, especially one whose game is built on being a dual threat, we really cannot overstate the importance of this. The other thing that we see from him here is that when there are chasers coming from behind, maybe when, in this case right now, right after he passes the line of scrimmage and goes from right to left, running in this curvilinear fashion with multiple chasers, the ability to scan and solve the problem functionally that exists in front of you at the same time. Remember, it's this constant problem and solution dynamics, right? You guys have heard me say this over and over again. This problem and solution dynamics, changing states of organization, the dispositional problem that lies in front of oneself as well as around oneself. And then in this case, behind oneself as well. So this multi-layered movement problem solving. And this is awfully skillful just because he's knowing when to navigate. He makes this turn and people will say, well, this could be completely coincidental. And I'll show you what I'm pointing to here. Once he escapes the pocket, even if you look at this right here, just again, that subtle movement to get away from two defenders. And now we got a chaser in 20 and a chaser in 43. Watch him move right here. He feels this guy. And so if you see my mouse, feels him out of the periphery, okay, sees him out of the periphery most likely, but also feels him right behind. And he uses that knowing that 20 is not going to be able to turn that curve in the same way. Here he gets that little hesitation, this little hezzy up in the open field to just draw some guys in, give himself more time, give himself more options, and open up some additional space as well right there. I mean, there are some layers here. Typically, we would draw much more attention to these things. And again, he doesn't have the same type of speed as say maybe a Lamar Jackson does in the open field. I think we're seeing that. And I hate to keep bringing up Lamar Jackson's name because, like I said, I believe that Malik Willis is more of a Jalen Hurts type of style. So he's closer to a Jalen Hurts than he would be to a Lamar Jackson. But I mean, you're seeing similar adaptability, similar creativity as those guys. Okay. And I believe, obviously, as I've promoted here at Football Beyond the Stats, that's where the quarterback position in the National Football League is going. And Malik Willis just happens to be the next generation, the next guy in that in that sequence of guys. So obviously there's a reason as to why the intrigue is so high. There's a reason as to why the buzz is about Malik Willis. I think it's very, very warranted. And I think he's going to make good on some people's predictions there. Now, of course, as I've mentioned numerous times before, the National Football League and predicting success or predicting failure, prognosticating about who a player is and how a player's skill set translates is going to be a highly complex non-determinate system. It's a highly complex system with non-determinate nature to it. So it's very hard to predict. Hence the reason why GMs get paid big bucks and they still sometimes fail at that talent identification. However, based on what we've seen from Malik Willis and what he possesses from an abundance and creativity and adaptability and movement in space and really being a dual threat thrower of the football along with an evasive runner in space. I would put my money on Malik Willis, and I think some team is going to end up being very, very happy that they didn't listen to the pundits, that they didn't listen to the naysayers, and they actually trusted in who he is and what his skills about. So, guys and gals, I enjoyed this week of the National Football League draft preparation alongside of you. I hope you did as well. I think what we're going to end up doing here in the next number of months as we approach the 2022 National Football League season is we'll get into some throwbacks. We'll get into some, maybe even some other sports. We'll get into some things and we'll keep ourselves in this movement synthesis or analysis, whichever way you want to look at it, but it's more of a synthesis. We'll keep ourselves engaged in that so we are fully prepared for the 2022 National Football League season. I hope you all enjoy the National Football League draft. And if you want to interact with me, obviously check out the show notes, and I will talk to you all next time.